Welcome back, everybody, to season 3 of Instrumental.
Yay!
We've missed you.
I've missed you too.
I'm JJ.
I'm Dave, her husband.
And if you've been following along for seasons 1 and 2, you know that the format of our show is a little bit unusual. We like to tell our guest stories backwards.
However, over the past year, we interviewed quite a few amazing people whose stories didn't quite work with our format. But since we get to make up the rules around here,
Yes.
we decided to go ahead and break our format for this season because you really need to hear these stories.
This first episode features some adult themes and may not be appropriate for little ears. So, if you have children listening along with you, they might need to sit this one out.
However, JJ's music is appropriate for little ears, so feel free to tell Siri or Alexa to play music by JJ Heller anytime.
Before we move on to today's episode, let's hear a word from our sponsor.
Do we have a sponsor?
Yeah.
We do?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's us.
Oh.
We are the sponsor.
All right.
We're sponsoring our own podcast.
I'm my own sponsor. Today's show is brought to you by JJ Heller's newest album, I Dream of You, Volume 3, releasing on February 5th.
But you don't have to wait a month to begin hearing music from the album because every Friday from now until the album comes out, we're releasing a new single from the record wherever you listen to music.
We've been working on I Dream of You Volume 3 for over a year.
Whew.
And while the two previous I Dream of You albums were designed to express a parent's love for their children, when we made this album, we took a different approach.
I Dream of You Volume 3 features covers of some of our favorite romantic love songs of all time.
Ooh, romantic.
Recorded in our signature whimsical and orchestral I Dream of You style.
Because heaven knows, all of us adults could use some beautiful and peaceful music right about now.
That's so true. This album was created to evoke feelings of nostalgia.
Yeah, I like to say that it's like a Christmas album you can play all year long. It's really special.
So, look for new music from me, JJ Heller, every Friday from now through February 5th when the album comes out.
Alrighty, on with the show.
I'm JJ Heller, and this is Instrumental, a show about the big and small moments that shape our lives.
Big love happens in the small moments.
Our guest this week is my dear friend, Lyndee Johnson. And she lives in Phoenix, Arizona, where you and I used to live.
Mm-hmm.
So I've known her for about 10 years. She is a nurse practitioner. She works in the clinic at Grand Canyon University. And boy, when I was a young mom, it was so nice to have a friend like Lindy who I could call and ask questions about like baby fevers and rashes and things.
And for her to tell you your baby's not dying.
I know.
You're okay.
I was so nervous.
First time mom.
And Lindy was so calming and just such a wonderful friend. But I remember the first time I heard Lindy tell her story, I was so blown away. And when we started this podcast, I thought, goodness, wouldn't it be amazing if Lindy would agree to come on? And we had to kind of talk her into it. But this is just an incredible episode. You guys are in for such a treat. Before we jump into Lindy's story, here's a little bit of context. She grew up in a conservative Christian family. She was a good Christian girl. And then, when she was a teenager, she was sexually assaulted, and everything changed.
I thought that because I did the right things, that God would protect me. And so it felt very isolating. And I was really angry because I thought that's not the way this works. I do the correct things, and then God, you keep me safe. Easy. And it didn't work out that way. And then growing up in a legalistic environment, I don't know how to even go tell my parents because I think they would go, well, it's your fault, even though it wasn't. But it's that shame that comes over you of like, I should have done better. I should have just known the red flags from the beginning, and I didn't. And so there's that shame of like, this is my fault, and I could have prevented it. And so I think it was that fear of disappointing my parents of like, hey, I know that you said it's best to be a virgin when you get married, and I screwed it up. So I went off to college to play soccer, and I was angry. I thought, well, this good girl thing didn't really work out, so I'm going to just kind of do what I want. I decided, well, I'm just going to find another guy because this guy sucks and it's not working out. Yeah. And so I latched onto someone else on the basketball team. And so with any college sport, you're in the weight room a lot. And so I spotted him in the weight room and I was like, yeah, that guy is a good looking man. So we started sleeping together from day one. It was like he was broken, I was broken. But when we slept together, it made it better. I was a complete Jekyll and Hyde, but really just kind of struggling on who do I want to be. And so it looked like I was a young life leader. So Monday night with the kids and like, yes, Jesus is so awesome. And then during the week, I'm sleeping with my boyfriend after practice. It was a constant battle of like, I just don't even know who I am anymore. I don't recognize what's happening. This was back before there was like a lot of women's sports. And so they had to create enough women's sports to match the boys' sports. Otherwise, they would lose their funding. So this tennis coach came out to the soccer field and she was like, hey, I'm going to pick some of you and I'm going to recruit you and I'm going to teach you how to play tennis. And I was like, okay. So we joke around that I went on a tennis scholarship to college and I'd never played a day in my life.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I get this tennis scholarship and I'm in this relationship with Michael. And all of a sudden my tennis skirt is not fitting. I can't button it. And I can't figure out what in the world, like I am working out so much, how could my tennis skirt not be fitting? And I didn't even think of any other options that would normally happen when you're having sex with someone. And so a friend of mine was like, maybe you should take a pregnancy test. And I was like, what? So we decided after practice that we would head over to the local Planned Parenthood. And no questions asked, I took my pregnancy test. I remember sitting there thinking, why am I even in this place? I would be mortified if anyone knew I was even here. How did I even get here? And the nurse, you know, they take the test and they stuck it on the counter and she's like, I'll be right back. And all I could do is I'm just watching the test and then I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I'm looking at my friend and then I probably said an expletive, but I won't say that on a podcast.
Like when you saw like the second line appearing or whatever the positive indication was.
I told her, what am I going to tell my parents? And she just looked at me like, I have no idea.
Did you consider abortion at all? I mean, like, what's going through your mind?
As wild as I had become with my own sexuality, I was like, no, I will not abort this baby. I'm going to figure this out. I mean, I literally left Planned Parenthood and drove back to campus because I knew that my boyfriend was there on campus finishing up his workout. And so I can remember standing between the gym and where the like student union is and walking with him. And I'm like, hey, I have to tell you something. I'm like, I'm pregnant. And he goes, get rid of it. And then I said another expletive, you. And then I walked away and he walked away. And then I drove home. And I was like, that didn't go the way that I was expecting.
What were you expecting?
I think he'll probably just marry me and we'll get married and we'll have a baby and everything will be okay. This is what happens. You get pregnant, then the guy says, okay, let's get married. But it didn't look like that at all.
Did you, looking back, do you feel like you had any sort of friendship with him at the time, or was it pretty much just physical?
No, it was purely physical. There was no roots to that relationship at all. I literally think we just kind of used each other physically to mask the deep wounds of what we both were carrying, for sure.
You get upset and you drive home. Then you have to face your parents.
Yeah, I did not say anything to my parents. My parents didn't even know that I was sexually active. They still thought I was the young life leader and on a scholarship for sports. And so they didn't even know what was happening. It was all very hidden. So I said nothing to my parents at all. I don't know what I was thinking that they just wouldn't notice.
So then how did they eventually find out?
Honestly, I'm not exactly sure how they found out, except for that I was puking my guts out every morning, every afternoon. And my waistline was changing, hence the tennis skirt not fitting. And they finally sat me down. Oh gosh. They point blank asked me, "Are you pregnant?" And I just looked at them and I said, "Yes." And kind of the whole world collapsed. My father was so angry. He threw something across the room. He said some things that weren't so nice. And then my mother, she was silent. I didn't hear her speak to me for a good 48 hours. So it was very lonely because I'm already afraid. And then your parents who you are like, okay, I'm telling you something that's really hard. And I understand their pain too now as an adult. They were scared too.
Yeah.
They didn't know. And this was shattering the image that we had within the church. You know, father's an elder, daughters are all thriving, doing well. And now their oldest daughter shattered it. You can't hide a pregnancy. It's going to come out and everyone's going to know. Eventually, my mother started talking to me and my dad too. And they were like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I have no idea." And so they said, "Who is this guy? We don't even know him." So my dad called a meeting with him and they met at my dad's office. And so my dad has this super long conference room table. So he's an attorney. And so he calls him to this crazy room and he puts him on one side of the table, the very, very edge. And then he's on the other side.
Wow.
And he said, "What are your intentions with my daughter?" And he said, "Well, I don't love her."
Whoa.
And he said, "Okay." He said, "That's all I needed to know." So my dad came back to me and he said, "I think that you should consider adoption. I'm going to tell you something that's hard." He said, "I did ask him and he said he doesn't love you and he doesn't have any intent to marry you." So that was really painful. So it was very lonely of, okay, so I'm actually in this by myself.
After Michael said, "Get rid of the baby," did you eventually pick back up with him again?
Yeah, he ended up calling back later that night and he's like, "I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I don't think that you should get rid of the baby." He's like, "I don't know what to do. I'm really scared." And I said, "It's okay. I'm scared too."
Do you remember when you came to the decision to give the baby up for adoption?
I do. Adoption is really tricky. The world is not kind to birth mothers. It's a very shameful place to be. And so even just using the terms "you gave your child away," it's very derogative. How could you give your child away? Instead of, "I'm giving my child a future." I've heard people say, birth mothers, they don't choose their children. And I disagree with that statement, as sometimes adoption is choosing the child. So it was a long process. I did counseling. I met with single mothers. I met with adoptive mothers. I met with birth mothers. And I was like, "Please tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do." They all would look at me and say, "This is your decision. You have to figure this out. You have to follow your heart and you have to do what you think is best." So it was like I just started to notice, I remember being really hyper alert to everything. When I would drive my car, I would notice every single mother that was maybe sitting on a bus stop and she looked like she was struggling. The kids were crying in the grocery stores. I was always watching and going, can I do this? What are my resources? I called childcare providers. What does it cost to put a child in daycare? What is it going to look like for me to finish college? Can I finish college? My scholarships were gone. I lost all the athletic ones because you can't play soccer and tennis pregnant. So those were gone. And so it was this whole thing of what am I supposed to do and what is best for her, really. I don't have an income. I am 18 years old. I don't know how to do anything. I mean, I was working at Paradise Bakery at the mall. I didn't live on my own. My car wasn't even my own. It was my father's. So it was this like, well, how am I supposed to take care of a human with nothing? I want to make the absolute best decision, but I'm still a mother. You can feel the baby move inside of you. So you love that baby. You go to an ultrasound and you go, oh my gosh, there she is. And then when you find out it's a little girl, you think you have all these hopes and dreams for her. And then you look at your reality and you say, what is the best gift I can give her? If I keep her, am I keeping her because I don't want to have the pain of the loss of letting her go? Or is it, I'm going to let her go because it's so painful for me, but she won't know that pain because she's going to grow up with a mom and a dad, and she's going to get to do all the things that she wants to do. There won't be any passing back and forth. There won't be who has custody this weekend or who's the new girlfriend or the new boyfriend. She'll have stability. And so it's that constant battle of, I want to give her the absolute best, as we all do with our kids. How do I give that to her when I'm so messed up inside? And so ultimately, I couldn't even make the decision for adoption until after she was born. I couldn't. I battled it over and over and over again. Because my father's an attorney, he actually had an adoption attorney working in the office. They said, come on in and go ahead and just read the files of all these adoptive families. So I would sit in this file room on the floor with stacks of adoptive families, and I would read all the letters and how desperate they were for a kid. This is what the mom is like. This is what the dad is like. And I was like, this is so weird. I don't even know what I'm doing. And then I would have people call me all the time. Will you consider my sister and her husband? They're amazing people. Can you meet with them? And when you're 18, and then you have these grown-ups calling you about your child, it's very strange.
Yeah.
As I'm learning now, I wasn't a drug addict. I didn't have any physical or mental disabilities. My boyfriend was healthy. And so we didn't have anything that people go, oh, red flag, I don't want that kid. And I know that sounds really crazy, but what happened was my child became highly sought after, which is super strange. And so I started meeting with couples. I would go to these meetings and they would tell me all the reasons why they should be chosen. And grown men would cry, please pick me. And I would just look at them and I'm like, I am still a kid myself. I don't know how to make this decision. And I would look at them and I'm like, I could just tell it's not you and it's not you and it's not you.
Like, you're not the person to raise my child?
Yeah. Like you could tell, like in my heart, I was like, it's not supposed to be you. I could feel that. But it's really hard to disappoint someone when they're begging you and they're crying and they're giving you their sob story of, which I'm totally am and empathetic for, of like the infertility route. Because I'm like, if I would give you all if I could. But I'm also connected to this child and I don't even know if I'm going to place her. I don't even know if that's the right decision. But I was trying to do my due diligence of what is this going to look like? I was at the office and someone sent over a fax and it had their picture. And I looked at the picture and I was like, that's them. Which is weird because I hadn't even read their file yet. And I was like, if I decide to do adoption, this is the family that I'm supposed to pick. And then I read the file and they were outdoorsy. They loved God. She was a nurse. He was a engineer at the time. And so she was a stay-at-home mom, essentially. All the things that I wanted. He was more like emotional and gentle and the things that I really wanted. I was like, I think this is it. Then the adoption attorney calls them and says, okay, you're being considered. So now they're under a whole other pressure of how do we get her to choose us? So the day I went into labor, the attorney, apparently, I didn't know this till later, called them and said, she's in labor, come to Phoenix. But I hadn't made my decision yet.
Oh.
So they came to Phoenix and were waiting. And then they never heard. Because I'm in the hospital having a baby. And then even when I had her, I look at her and I go, I don't know. I don't know what to do because my heart is about to rip out. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And so the attorney called and said, she doesn't know what she's going to do. So they said, okay. So they said, you should just go back home. So they get back on the airplane and go back to Colorado. And they said, we're crushed right now. So please do not contact us unless the papers are actually signed. But I never knew any of that.
Wow.
So were you expecting like immediate clarity when you saw her, that you would just know?
I think I was hoping for that because I had prayed so intently that God would make it really clear. Like my verbiage with him was constantly a note under the pillow. I need it so obvious. I need it so obvious. And I just didn't know what to do. And so I thought maybe when I see her, I will know what I'm supposed to do. So I had her and I was like, oh my gosh, she's amazing. Look at this baby girl. I just love every little inch of her. This isn't helping. I don't know what to do. So the baby goes home with me for 3 weeks. I have her at home. And I am still trying to figure out what to do. I went to bed one night and I had a dream that her father would come to know the Lord if I let her go. And I thought that was the weirdest dream because he was an atheist. He had told me multiple times that he would never believe in God. It was not his thing. And it was all a bunch of crap. And so I thought that was a super weird dream. And then I told my mother about it the next day. And she said, I had the same dream. And I was like, okay, that's the note under my pillow. That's what I needed to know. So I called that family that was in Colorado that day. I told them, I'm signing the papers. Go ahead and get your flights. So I called the attorney, and the attorney came over, and Michael came over. We signed the paperwork. It was pretty horrific. I remember, like, we didn't even turn the lights on. It was like we were just sitting kind of in the dark in my parents' living room and staring at the paperwork. And Michael was angry. I was just super sad. We don't know if this is the worst thing we're ever doing. We just know that we can't give her the life that she deserves. So he signed and I signed, and then we said we can't see each other anymore, ever. So let's not contact each other because this is just too painful. It's really essentially a loss of a child. We felt like you're burying them. So he left, and then the Feldatos got on a flight, and they were on their way.
Why was Michael angry?
Michael is an adoptive child himself, but his adoption was different because he was a child of the system. So he was a foster child who'd been removed multiple times and had been in different foster homes. So he felt like he was failing his child by not being able to parent, that he was doing the very thing that he hated his birth parents for, that they were not able to take care of him. And so he felt like he was becoming them, essentially.
Wow.
And Michael was there for labor. He was there for all of it. He cut the cord.
Oh, wow.
He was present. So we named her Justice Ann. And then they changed her name to Maria Ann. And they, because this adoption was going to go across state lines, they had to stay in Arizona for a certain period of time just in case I changed my mind. Because there's a period, I think the law might have changed at this point, but at that point in time, once you sign, I believe it was 72 hours that I could take that back and say, never mind. So there was a Young Life family in Arcadia, at like another area in Central Phoenix, that said they could stay with them. So they went to their house. So Melissa, And Kevin and Sam, as their son, they all showed up at my parents' house to come pick her up.
It's hard to even imagine how complex all those emotions in the same room would be. Do you remember what it was like?
Yeah, I remember them opening the door and them feeling, you could tell they were excited, but they knew that they were entering into a place of deep grief and loss. And so they were respectful, but you could feel it, that they were like, we're getting a child today. Part of me was like, I'm so glad they're excited. And also, this is the absolute worst day of my life. They came in and my dad looked at me and he said, you can change your mind. Like, we'll help you. My parents softened a lot. What started as such a legalistic environment, you can't live through this type of thing without God's grace. And so we learned grace to a whole new level, and the legalism was shattered because they were losing their grandchild.
Yeah.
So I think the reality of it, when the Faldatos entered the room, they thought, oh my gosh, this is actually really painful. So we all gathered together around her, and everyone kind of held her for the last time. And we circled up, and my dad prayed and sobbed and prayed. And then it was time to say goodbye. So I grab her and I kiss her and I stick her in her little car seat and I buckled it. And I just said, please take good care of her and love her. Don't love her differently. Love her like your own. And it was really horrific because it felt like my heart had been ripped out. But I knew I was giving her life that I couldn't give her. And so I told her, I'm choosing you. I'm choosing you over me because I want to keep you so bad. And if I just keep you, my pain will be less and I don't have to go through this grief, but it's not going to do you any good. And so I have to let you go and I'll be okay, I think. But I know that you're going to thrive. And so they took her and they left. And I just went into my bedroom and I shut the door and I laid down on my bed and I did not move, I think, for days. I couldn't even turn the light on. I would go out to use the bathroom, but I didn't eat. I couldn't do anything. It was by far the most horrific thing I've ever experienced.
When you had that kind of season of just sort of lying in your room, what do you remember going through your mind?
I remember being like, man, God, you kind of suck right now because this is really painful. And you asked me to do something really, really hard. And I'm not really feeling your presence. I'm not feeling anything. It feels really lonely and dark. And I need to feel something. I need to know that you're here. I contemplated taking my life multiple times. I thought life is too hard. This sucks. And I've made a mess of my life. I've lost all my scholarships. And I'm just wasting away in my room. And so what is the point? And then I do think this is where God's presence was there, as he said, no, you have a daughter and she's going to want to know. She's going to want you alive. She's going to have questions for you. If you decide to just take your life, it will be more harmful for her. And so that kind of gave me the strength to go, okay, I can do another day. I'm going to breathe another day. I'm just going to breathe another day. So little by little, I got a little bit stronger. And friends would come visit me, and they would tell you I was not a very fun person to visit. They would just sit, and I would just stare at them, and I would say, "Why are you here?" And it was awkward because, again, you're dealing with 19-year-olds who haven't had real loss. And so their biggest thing is, what am I going to wear out on the weekend? Or what's my hardest class? And then their friend who just lost their child. So we're all looking at each other like, I don't even know who you are. I don't know what to say. But I had some really wonderful friends that would just come sit and say nothing. It's really precious that they did that. What's funny is that the Faldatos told me now, when they took Maria away and they got her in the car seat. So I'm like having the worst day of my life. And they said they get her in the car and they go, it's like we were waiting until we were far enough away from your house. And said they all just screamed in joy. But they go, we didn't want you to know. We didn't want you to accidentally hear our joy.
Yeah.
It is very humbling to think that on my very worst day of my entire life, it was their very best day.
Thinking back to that contrast of your experience versus their experience, what do you think about it now?
I think now my empathy of how hard it must have been that they wanted a child so desperately, and like their prayers came to fruition through my pain. I feel blessed that I got to be a part of their story, and also really sad that I'm part of their story. Because it's not a story that you would want for someone. But there's been so much beauty out of it. It actually is really soothing to my grief to know how much they wanted her. That how many years they prayed for her, how many medical treatments they tried and failed, how many people were praying for them, to then where you literally scream out in joy. It's like, that is amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. So my good old young life leader kept pursuing me and was like, hey, you need to get out of your house. And I was like, no, I don't. And he said, hey, I signed you up for a summer camp that's up in Northern California.
And what was your response?
I told him, there is no way in heck I am going to a God camp because I hate God and I'm going to tell all the kids. He goes, that's really great, Lindy, because I'm putting you in the office. You're not going to see a single kid. So he knew. And like we joke around about it, that I was literally arguing with him. I am not going. As I am putting my bag up on top of the bus. I'm not going here, Matt. And he goes, yes, you are. Sit down. So I went with a teenage attitude of like, I don't know why I'm going here.
And how long after you said goodbye to Maria were you getting on the bus?
7-8 months.
So you were just like in a heavy fog for half of a year.
Yeah, I was in a pretty deep depression and grief during that time. So he gets me to go on this bus, and I'm working in this office. And at these camps, there are always some adult leaders that come to make sure that we're also growing and making good choices. And there was a woman who would come visit me every single day in the office. So Susan would come sit with me and tell me about her own pain and loss. And she did such a good job of making me not feel alone, not feeling the shame of what I did. And then even back to the assault, I mean, she just was so awesome and affirming of like, you are so loved, you're not alone. And so she was very soothing for me.
So were you sharing parts of your story with her?
Yeah, so she didn't know anything about my story. She had kind of gotten like a synopsis, like, hey, there's a girl in the office. She's pretty angry. I think she gave her kid away. And so she's like, she probably needs some extra love on her. So who can go see her? And Susan was like, me, I love the super broken. So she came for me. So I was probably her special project, and she'll probably never admit it, but I probably was. So she came in there and she just loved on me. She didn't give me rules. She didn't tell me all the things that I had messed up. She just sat. So we developed a pretty good relationship, and we started to share our stories more and more. as the weeks went on, Susan is not afraid of her brokenness. She's not afraid of pain. You know, some people get afraid to go, you look really sad. She would just go into it. She would say, you seem really sad. What's going on? And I could easily say, I feel like I want to die. And she was like, okay. And Susan shared with me that she had had abortions, actually.
Wow.
So she knew the fear of unwanted pregnancy, the shame, and ultimately made a decision different than mine, but still she understood the loss of it.
And it sounds like by her sharing that with you, it indicated to you that she was a safe person to share your story with.
Yes, because she shared her most vulnerable and darkest moment. That's not something that Christians tend to walk around and go, guess what I did? There's a lot of shame associated with that, as is being a birth mother and adoption. So it's like we had a mutual of like, I get it. Yeah. I understand that it's not even, there really isn't a safe place where people go, oh yeah, I got you. It's like oh. So we understood that. If she felt safe enough to tell me her dirtiest, darkest secrets, I could trust her with mine, and she would understand. Part of the agreement when I got on that bus is that I had told God, this was his last try, buddy. Like I was done. And I said, like, you have to show me something to know that I know that you're real, because right now I don't feel you, I don't see you, I don't hear you, and my life is a explosion. And so you've got one last try or I am walking away from it all. So Susan was a breath of fresh air. So the last week we're there, we're sitting out in like this grassy area and there's a hammock set up. So we're sitting on the hammock and I'm telling her like the nitty gritty, like this is the big finale. I gave my child away and I gave her the story. And she says, gosh, you know, I have been praying for a woman who also placed her baby for adoption. And I was like, really? So then we were like grieving over that together. And she said, yeah, I even went over to this house with my friends, like my Bible study women, like the women that were basically there at camp. She's like, we all went over to this house and we held this baby and we prayed over her. And we prayed for this mom so much. And I'm like, wow, that is incredible. And I said, when was this? And so she's telling me, and I'm like, okay. And she goes, it's a baby girl. And I'm like, it's a baby girl? And I go, I had a baby girl. And she said, yeah, this family, they're from Colorado. And so we literally figure out that I am the woman, that I am the birth mother that she had been praying for, that she held my daughter. And it was like this crazy breaking of love from the Lord, of like all this time I thought he abandoned me. And he was like, I got you, down to the wire of having Susan be at this camp with you. Like, she is the one who prayed for you. She is the one who physically touched your daughter. And so she knows what her toes look like. She knows the color of her hair. She knows what she smells like. I've never felt so known by God before, of like, oh my gosh, he actually cares about me. And the hard decision and all of it, like he was there. He knew it.
Did Susan live in Arizona?
Yeah. So when the Feldados came over, remember they had to stay in Arizona for 72 hours.
Okay. Yeah.
So the Feldados, so she actually even met the Feldados. So she was there in that home during that 72-hour period. She was there to pray over them. So she met the whole gang, the whole family. She was fully immersed in it and had no idea. She'd never met those people. She'd never met me. That's what's so crazy about it.
Wow.
I mean, every time Susan and I see each other now, we just start crying instantly. Like there is such a deep bond now that we don't have to say anything because the moment was so holy that you cannot plan that because she did not know, I did not know, and to have it align so perfectly. So it was unreal. I went and saw her twice. I went and saw her, I think, before she was 1, and then I saw her at like 18 months. I saw her again. I was coaching volleyball, and we had a tournament in Colorado Springs, so we went to visit them there. I literally took my entire volleyball team with me, high schoolers. Oh my gosh. It was like I basically was like, hey girls, so we're in that big like passenger van. I was like, I'm going to give you a really short story. Okay. So I got pregnant when I was a teenager, gave my baby up for adoption. And I'm actually going to go see her at this restaurant. So you guys just kind of chill out, just sit at the table, eat your food, and then I'll try and catch you up later. I'm like, what was I thinking? And so, so we all had dinner. I'm like, this Mexican food restaurant, like it's so crazy to me now. And I am walking around with this toddler. That's my daughter, but it feels different. And so I'm just loving her and chasing her around. And then I say goodbye and I get back in this 12-passenger van with my volleyball team. And they're all looking at me with like huge saucer eyes. And I'm just bawling my eyes out. Like, I'll be okay. I'll be okay by the game tomorrow is all I could say.
Wow.
What was going through your mind when you got back in the van?
It just felt like the loss all over again. It's like this, you go and you're like, oh my gosh, it was so great to see her. She was thriving. She loved her mom and dad. She loved her brother. She was like this typical, beautiful little toddler, healthy girl. And then I had to walk away again. And so it's like your heart rips out again. And you think, oh my gosh, that was so painful. And I'm so glad I got to see her. But that hurts so bad. Like it kind of takes you back to that moment of when I buckled her in her car seat of like, oh my gosh, this hurts. But I know it's what I'm supposed to be doing. But it is weird. It is a weird, like she has a different mom and a different dad.
Yeah.
So that was the last time physically I was allowed to see her. At this point, she didn't know what was happening because she was under 2. So she wouldn't know, she wouldn't remember.
Sure.
We had kind of agreed like, I'll get to come visit her when she's so little. And then as she grows up, we don't want to create confusion in her of like, wait, who is that?
Yeah.
She's my birth mom? That doesn't make sense to me. This is my mom. So they would send me, I would get letters and pictures every Mother's Day and pretty much like birthday or Christmas. So like twice a year was pretty much the average.
Yeah.
I would get something so I could see how she was doing. The first time Maria ever called me on the phone, which was shocking in itself. I literally had gotten home from the hospital having Miley. It was that day.
Whoa.
And she just called out of the blue?
Yes. Yeah, it was pretty shocking. I was not, her parents had said, hey, Maria would like to talk to you. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. Like, okay, this is something.
So you had just had your second baby girl.
Yes.
And you come in the door, and this time you're married.
Yes.
You get to keep this child. You get to mother this child in person.
Yeah.
And then you're immediately contacted by
your other biological child.
Yeah.
Sounds way more dramatic when you say it.
I mean, so much going on in that moment. What was that like?
Okay. JJ can remember, after you have a baby, your hormones are kind of crazy. And so you just kind of cry and you're like, I don't even know why I'm crying kind of a thing. Or like you laugh, like it's just kind of a mess. And so I was also really lucky that I had a spinal headache. And so I could not lift my head up. So I had to lay flat. So I get home with my brand new baby. So Kevin had called and said, hey, Maria would like to talk to you if that's okay. And I was like, of course, because I always had said, if she ever wants to know me, there will be no like, I placed you, I don't want anything to do with you. It'll be absolutely, ask me anything you want.
Did the Feldados know that you were about to have a baby, that you were home from the hospital, or was this just like a random thing where they just happened to reach out?
I think it was random. I don't think that they would have called me if they would have known that I literally just got home from the hospital.
And had to lie down.
Lie down flat. And so it was like, and then you're talking to a 9-year-old girl, this little sweet little voice. And I'm so excited that she wanted to call me, that she wanted to talk to me. And so I'm like laying flat and I have tears streaming down my face, but I don't want her to know I'm crying because I don't want to scare her. So I'm like, hi, how are you? Like this weird voice because I'm just so happy, but she's 9. And so the conversation, like you think you're going to have this deep conversation and it's more like, what's your favorite color?
Yeah.
What do you like to eat? What do you do? Like it was such a sweet, innocent conversation. And then she was like, in her voice, okay, see you later. And hung up the phone. And then I'm still tears streaming down my face like, oh my gosh, that was crazy.
And meanwhile, you're like holding Maria's baby sister.
Yeah. Like she has no idea yet. Like this, she has no idea what is happening over here.
Did you, in your mind, continue to call her Justice?
I did for a while. Eventually, I started to shift because I thought, she's Maria. That's what she knows.
Yeah.
And I want to respect that her parents gave her that name. It was really important to me that her parents felt safe, that they didn't feel threatened by me. A lot of adoptive mothers are very intimidated by birth mothers because children naturally love their birth moms, even when they're horrific people. They really love their birth moms. And I didn't want them to feel insecure or that I was going to undermine anything because I would have done anything to keep the contact open. And I was really grateful for them. Like they were such an amazing family. They were taking such good care of her. So out of respect for them, I kind of had that shifting as she got older. I was like, I actually need to call her by her name. She's Maria. That's what she knows.
Yeah. So you have that conversation when she's about 9.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next time that you hear from her is when?
I had always thought after that conversation that Maria would come back around when she was 18, is what I had in my mind. She'll become an adult. She'll go off to college. She'll want to know where she came from. And then she'll say, I want to talk to you. I want to meet you. And we'll have this big thing. So my husband comes home from work and he goes, hey, I decided to email the Feldados and tell them that we're ready to meet Maria whenever they're ready. And I'm like, what? What did you do?
Just kind of like a unilateral decision.
Yeah. I was like, conversations that you should have with your wife in advance before you push send. And so I was so mad. So yeah, that was a really fun conversation with my husband that we had to work out. But really it was just fear. I think I thought maybe she would like me a little bit more when she was 18 and maybe because she lived a little bit more life, maybe she'd have more grace. And then I was afraid, like, do I have the backbone right now for her to tell me all the things that I'm afraid to hear?
What was the thing that you were really afraid that she would say?
I think I was afraid she was going to say, I struggle with my self-identity because you rejected me. I hate you because you didn't choose me, essentially. Like you didn't choose parenting instead. Or she thought that I placed her because that was the easier thing to do, which is so not true. But I thought that maybe in a 15-year-old's brain, that is probably what she thought. Because when you're 15, you don't like your parents that much. I was afraid of that too. Like, was she going to be like, I don't even like my parents. I just want to come live with you. And then I was nervous about that. You know, of like, we would be different, like maybe our discipline would be different. So all those things that happened with a 15-year-old that I thought, oh my gosh, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
But it turned out being super awesome and super healing.
So what happened?
So my husband sent the email and I'm pretty sure the Feldados were like, holy crap, what is this coming from?
And how old was she at that time?
I think it was 14, 15.
Okay.
And they said, okay, we're going to pray about it and we're going to discuss it and see how to do this. And we said, sure, whatever you guys want to do. So they decided, yep, we'll come to Phoenix on spring break. We'll bring her out. And we were like, okay, oh my gosh. So my girls are little, and they were aware that they had a sister. Her pictures have always been up on the wall. We've always talked about her. We would always send her birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, but they don't have the understanding of this is your actual sister because she doesn't live with us. So it's a little bit confusing for kids so young.
Yeah.
So we did tell them, your sister's coming to town. And they were like, great. They were so excited, like so excited to meet their sister. But they did, I think that was the first time Miley said, why doesn't she live with us? And that was a really hard question to answer at 5 or 6 or however old she was. Maybe she was 4. She was little.
Do you remember what you said?
I don't remember. I'm sure it was along the lines of like, mommy wasn't able to take care of her when I had her. And so the Feldados have been taking care of her.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, okay. You know.
Yeah.
Let's go play. Okay, so describe when you saw Maria. Like, were you guys waiting outside for the car to pull up, or what was that like?
Oh my gosh. So we are like pacing in the backyard because we don't know what to do with ourselves, because you're like completely freaked out, but also completely excited. And then you're like terrified. Will she like me? Who is she going to like you better than she's going to like me? Is she going to be disappointed? Am I too fat, too skinny? Was my hair, like all the things, like, what is this going to look like? And so the side gate in front of our driveway, it's see-through. So it's just like wire, so you can see everything. So we're like pacing in front of this wire fence, and our driveway is gravel. So you hear the car pull into the gravel. So it's like that crunch, 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 crunch. And it pulls up, and you can see her in the back seat. And we're both like staring at her like, oh my gosh, she's real. And there she is. And so they come up, and she's kind of timid, and we're all kind of like, hi, hugs. Oh my gosh, we're so happy to see you. And then it's just a little awkward, because you're just like, I don't know.
Yeah, what is the appropriate thing to do right now?
No, and that's exactly how it was. It was like, I don't even know how to do this, and they don't know how to do it. So we're all just kind of smiling at each other like, we're here. Generic questions. Say, how was your travel? How was the flight? All the things. And then as the night went on, it got better. So they stayed for dinner. Even that, I was like, is she going to like my food? What if she's like, this is disgusting. I don't eat like this. So there's all this pressure, and it actually was really great. She was a little bit numbed out. I think she was just kind of in shock.
Yeah.
We pretty much just stared at each other. Like, we would literally catch each other just staring at each other. And then looking back and forth, like, you look like me. This is so weird. And it was seeing, so Miley, she's like 5 or 4 or something. And then I'm looking at this grown 15-year-old going, you look exactly like my child, but grown. So that's a weird feeling. It's like fast forward the future. I can see a glimpse of it. I'm like, this is super weird. But it was such an awesome thing. So like dinner, we were able to sit and talk with the Feldados, like all the things. Like, we are so grateful that you're here. We respect you. We want you to know that. Like, we're never going to undermine your authority. And so all the things that were like this awkward kind of, what do you really think, we were able to talk about during dinner, which was awesome because we kind of got it out. So we all relaxed a little bit. We could have a glass of wine and just kind of take a breath.
Yeah.
Do you remember what food you prepared?
Oh, yeah. I always make spaghetti for people. That's like my one dish that most people like. But then I thought, I am cooking spaghetti for Italians. This is a disaster. What have I done? Oh my gosh. Yeah. But it was good. So Maria pretty much just chased her sisters around the yard. So I was just watching her play with her little sisters. And it was so surreal. Like, she would get on the trampoline with them. She would push them on the swing. And it just was really but to see them all together, I was like, this is crazy. How is this my like real life? This is crazy. And I got a chance to have a moment with her. I told her, I just want you to know that I'm really, really sorry. And she kind of looked at me shocked. And I said, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to take care of you. Like, know that it broke me. It crushed me. And all I wanted to do was to be your mom. But I didn't want you to struggle. I wanted you to have the best life possible. And so if you're angry at me, like, it's okay. And you can tell me all the things that have gone wrong, or all the things that I screwed up at. Like, I can handle it. So I want you to tell me if you're just really mad, and I'm going to let you have that space. But I said, I just want you to know that I'm really, really sorry. I wish that I was the mother for you. I wish I could have been that mom. I wish I could have taken care of you. And she just looked at me like totally shocked. And she's like, what? She's like, Lindy, I love you. She said, I am so grateful that you gave me the life that you gave me. She goes, I've never been angry at you for a second. I've always just been grateful that you chose this for me. So any shame that I had been feeling at that moment just like evaporated.
Wow.
It was the most healing moment of my life. It made everything from the sexual assault, from the placing my child for adoption, from people saying, how could you give your child away? Hiding, I hid my identity that I even had her from people that I worked with. You had to know me really well to know my real story, because I was so ashamed. And so to have her looking at me and to tell me, I forgive you. I am grateful for you. It was the most humbling moment of my life, because I thought, I don't deserve her love. I don't deserve her forgiveness. And yet she offered it to me from a 15-year-old body. At that moment, I no longer became private about it. It's when my story changed. It's when I said, guess what? Hey, I'm Lindy and I'm a birth mother. I no longer hid it. And people were shocked. They're like, you're a what? What did you do? And I no longer had that, I'm embarrassed. What are they going to think about me? I was like, no, this is what I did. Okay, so probably one of the most shocking parts of our story is that my husband is actually that Michael that I met in the weight room, that Michael who said he didn't love me, didn't want to marry me, would never believe in God. That man was struck by God's love and faithfulness. And now here we are, married 16 years, 5 kids, with an unbelievable, crazy restoration story. When we parted ways after signing the papers, that was it. It was like we're done. This is too painful. See you on the other side kind of a thing. And so there was never a plan of like, oh, when things die down, it was like, no, this is the end. And so slowly we kind of crept back to each other. You know, many, 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 many years later, Michael does come to know the Lord. We end up getting married. Then you have 2 biological parents get married, and then we have to write that letter to Maria's parents. Hey, we're getting married, just to make this a little bit more awkward. And that was hard. That was a hard thing, because they're like, what? Because it makes it a little bit more vulnerable. So when they're coming to reunite, that was something Michael and I were really conscious of. Just because we're married, just because we now have 2 other biological children at the time, 2 other little girls, that we are not there to try and steal Maria back. We are there to be there as birth parents and to celebrate you as adoptive parents, and just to do whatever Maria needs, like, and whatever you guys need, like, we stand beside you. So if you discipline something and she happens to call us and say, I don't agree with that, we're going to go, well, we're siding with your parents. So we got to have those pretty fragile conversations of, how did you guys feel when you got our wedding announcement? And they were able to say, it scared the crap out of us, because we thought, what's going to happen? Yeah. And then how did you feel when we said, hey, we've had a baby? Hey, we had another one. Oh, they're both girls and they look exactly like your child. So all of those dynamics of what is this going to look like when you have a full bio family with one displaced? It is unique. Like, it is a crazy story. And then we're lighthearted about it. Like, we joke around that, well, Maria's turned out so great. We'll go ahead and send you one of ours again, because if we're screwing it up, like, maybe you guys can show us what to do. And they've been wonderful. Like, they've been more like a mentoring couple for us, which is crazy.
Wow.
But we love them. Like, we love them like family. They talk to us about how they parent, so many things that we've able to learn from them. And we would hang out with them even if they weren't the adoptive parents. Like, that's how much we love them. That we're like, they're awesome. So we think we chose pretty well. We're like, yes, we did something good here. Michael being adoptive himself, being a child that came out of foster care, we knew from the minute we were getting married that we would actually adopt a child. So we entered into the foster care realm and started fostering a little boy when he was 3. And as foster care goes, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of pain. So he was with us for about a year. Then he went home for reunification, and then he came back. And at that point, there was severance, and we were able to adopt him. So we thought that we were complete at that point. So we had our 2 other little girls, then we had Jonah, and then surprise, we had Joby.
Wow.
So we have a very full family. This is where the shame has been broken. People used to say, how many kids do you have? And I would always stop for a second and think, how do I answer this question? Do I say just the kids that are in my house, or do I include my other child who I biologically had? And so before, I would just say, oh, I don't have any, or I have 1. And now I'm like, I have 5 kids, 5. And people are like, wow. And so then that gets a little more confusing. What are the ages? 21, 10. And they're like, oh my gosh. And so and then they kind of get like, what? And then they look at you and you're like, same dad. And they're like, same dad. So the whole thing, it just kind of gets crazier. And we have this beautiful, crazy family that we are just very grateful for.
It's so beautifully redemptive to me that you and Michael ended up getting married. I mean, because like when you were pregnant, you really wanted him to ask you to marry him, but the reason you wanted him to marry you was so that like you could raise your child together, not that you necessarily loved him.
Right.
And so when that reason was taken off the table, it kind of freed you up to actually fall in love with each other with no obligation.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing how like God brought your paths together again.
Yeah. It's miraculous. It literally was. He came to the Lord, and then the next day he says, he was on Costco.com finding me an engagement ring. Like, it was that like dramatic of, I just want to marry this woman. I love this woman. I can't believe it. And he says that to me all the time. I wish I would have married you sooner. We're a good team. We really love each other well.
Do you think that you and Michael would have gotten together if you hadn't given her up for adoption?
I don't think so. Parenting is really hard. As many horrible decisions that I made, I do feel like the Lord gave me a discernment that was beyond my years. I wish I could have that discernment back. But in that moment, like, he delivered. Like, that's where his presence was, is that I was thinking clearly about her life and not so self-focused, which is not typical of an 18-year-old. Now that I work with college kids, I'm understanding how rare that is, and that was not from me. That was clearly God-given.
If you go back to that horrible day where you buckled your daughter into the car seat and she drove away and you went into a dark room and lay down on your bed by yourself.
Yeah.
If that day hadn't happened, then you might not have the children that you have, the marriage that you have. It took that hard moment for the rest of it to unfold.
Yeah, There is an empathy that I did not have before. Those dark places shaped me in a way that I'm super grateful for. The Lord has opened lots of doors for me. In fact, whenever I get a phone call, when someone says, I need to come talk to you, I'm like, oh no. There's probably an unplanned pregnancy. There's something that happened. But I'm like, wow, that they would actually call me is encouraging. Like, it's like your pain is not in vain, I guess you could say. Like, the Lord is still using it. Like, God prepared me for this. He made my stories for this. So it's like it's a gift to be able to sit with women in their darkest moments.
Yeah.
I think when I reflect on my life, what I see is the story is never over. We might think it is, that even when the pain feels like it's going to swallow you and you just can't do another day, that the story isn't over. God is always working and we just can't see it. And I'm going to argue with God. And maybe not even in a respectful way, but he's going to show up. And then he's going to rock my world with a plot twist. And so just enjoy the ride. And that's pretty much where we're at. We're just enjoying the crazy ride.
This episode of Instrumental was produced by me, JJ Heller.
And me, Dave Heller.
Our theme music is my song, Big Love, Small Moments.
That I helped write.
To find out more about me, listen to more of my songs, or watch my music videos, please visit jjheller.com. That's 2 letter J's, HELLER.com.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Instrumental.
So be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.